Okay, hey, welcome everybody. Really excited to be kicking this off. And so I've got a special surprise here. What I want to cover today is a little bit about talking about the DJI L1 processing and some of the things that we're seeing in the market today. And so without further ado, I want to bring in one of our good friends. So this is Chris Clay, and here's Chris Clay here. And, I think before we get to starting and talking about the L1 and Terra processing and what we have been experiencing and how this differs from what we've been doing over the last 6 to 8 years. Why don't you tell everybody, who you are, Chris, and what you do and what makes you awesome?
I guess my claim to fame here really is, I got my start with the Army, and I've been processing, DoD type stuff where, a lot more difficult back in the day when it first got started.
Right.
That knowledge to the civilian side. I think that's really what's made me quite, worth my penny. When it comes to, I have details that I can share that other people would never have had, if you just got your information from university alone. So that's one of those things where I think it's really, really helped me along. And so what I do now is I lead a team of Lidar collection guys, and they go out there and they basically day in, day out are collecting and processing. And so I guide them on the processing and solutions, and we try to find better ways and easier ways of doing the same old hard stuff. So
yeah, but I think just so I can, for the audience here, so they can fully hear, how awesome. I mean, one, I think people don't fully understand the amount of education that the military intelligence community gets in geospatial science. I mean, it's pretty advanced, but then, you made a pretty big transition out of that, first working for survey crews and then actually working behind the scenes, with first deploying in the field and then working for a major integrator. So, I think for the audience here is that people need to realize that people like you and I aren't just out buying equipment, and we're not, right? We're not buying equipment, and we're working with people that make software and people that are doing the integrations, but we know in the background, how this technology actually fits together.
I think the best innovator, I think we're both innovators, and I think that's kind of what keeps pushing us along.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we were to look at what we do, it's that we, our integration piece is about process, and whether it's, it's a hardware part of the solution, a software part of the solution, or a dissemination visualization part of the solution. That's the unique space that we live in. Is like, I don't have an engineering focus, even though I work with engineers. You don't have a field work solution, even though you do that pretty extensively. When we deal with customers, we have to show the product viability.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up because, dude, you're pretty awesome. And, people need to understand the unique value in the market that you have. But hey, let's talk about this because, today's topic, we're going to talk about the L1 and, there's mixed things on both sides of the fence. Whether it's, DJI coming out with their first sensor, we've got people doing reviews, it's not accurate. There's people like, you never buy on the first time. We've got every integrator in the market right now freaking out that there is a low cost solution and cheap LiDAR is here. Yeah. So this is what we're experiencing in the market here, and I'll kind of lead off with, while I have all these mixed reviews on this, I'm excited that DJI came out with the L1. I know you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
But let me tell you why I'm excited, and you can kind of chime in here. I'm excited because, what's happening in the market here is significant. Yes, it's driving the price of LiDAR down. So, maybe like last year, there was margin for us to sell these things. So now it makes it a little more affordable because there is market pressure. But I think the other piece of this is not so much that you can go buy, a $1,500 or a $15,000 sensor versus a $60,000 now. and we'll talk about the true cost in a minute. It's that people are looking at this, adopting, that people are buying point clouds made from LiDAR off of a drone. There is this openness, or people now are exploring this as a viable option. That's why I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I can see all those points. I mean, I maybe have a few different points just from my experience with it, but I mean, the ability to scale for a company like, a utility company looking to in-house their operations, this is a solution. If you're not looking to do certain things with this unit, it can be very good. It can work very, very well for you. So about, not that I don't like the unit. Obviously, there's other units I like more, but that's not really what the conversation is about right now.
Right. Well, the one thing, as the market starts to adopt this, and we all know that there's going to be a lot of folks buying these over time. I mean, I think we're seeing a slow roll in DJI rolling it out, because we know that it's just not quite where it needs to be. But they need early adopters to buy, so they can actually fix a lot of the stuff that they're seeing.
But my concern that pushes sometimes could make people weary. Then it's really going to be better, and I think that you're right in the fact that there's always a series 2, there's always a series 3. Things are always going to get better, and doesn't mean that first generation is no good. Everything has its purpose still. It's just more a matter of you shouldn't get scared away from, which I'm seeing that. I'm seeing people get scared away from the unit, whether there's a second generation or a third generation coming along. They're afraid that they're going to experience the same difficulties.
Right.
That's just not true.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just like the people that are buying this technology, DJI is also making its first LiDAR journey, right? So a user, like, remember when we first started, survey, what the heck is survey? Yeah. And you have to learn the different facets, because, if we were to get into the debate of LiDAR versus photogrammetry, they are very different data modalities. Yeah. You fly differently, you measure differently, and you process differently. So, I know that. But what I think is really interesting is the way that they've come out with a product. They're advertising I think $13,000 or $15,000 sensor, and I think what they're not doing it justice to is all the other components that you have to buy. I mean, I have sensors that behind the scenes maybe I could sell at 22, and make a profit on, but that doesn't give them a complete solution. And that's what DJI has done, where, you've bought the sensor, but now what other things, like for you, let's talk about, field operations and processing, in generic terms. What are the things in a solution that you need to complete field work?
I mean, first of all, obviously really good control points that can be established and recognized through the data. My favorite is obviously using, targets, like visual targets, but hitting curbs, hitting rounded curbs, hitting tops and bottoms, doing things that you can line up on, and you can kind of start to detect your fuzz, see kind of what
yeah.
If you're dealing with a gimbaled unit, you're going to start to see a little bit more fuzz. If you're dealing with a fixed unit, you're going to be seeing a lot less fuzz. It's going to be more standardized, less interpolation between, movements of the gimbal pitch and all of that stuff. So there's I think a misnomer where this thing's going to be just as accurate no matter where you gimbal it. Well, if you were to fix that unit straight and it maintains its lever arm measurements and all of that, then there's no interpolation between these points. There's no more room for error, introduction of error. And that can be a very positive thing.
Right. Well, and as you know, lever arms just in general, can induce a couple centimeters of error in your mix. So, like you said, that interpolation piece is huge. Yeah. Where, now we're throwing in, and I think for the audience here, there's two types of errors we have to account for, right? We have non-systematic, and then we have systematic errors. And, so that, once we do an interpolation, we have a non-systematic error. And for the audience here, the important piece of that is you can't correct for it. Yeah. There's no way that we know, where, let's say we do the wrong projection, with good control, we can say, hey, there is a systematic error across our data, and we can fix it, And so these are the things. So that's a huge point.
With things that are moving, there's constant interpolation. And I think that's something that everybody needs to kind of understand, is that the more introduction of interpolated points, the less accurate something can be. And with a unit like this that has a limited field of view, and in the grand scheme of things, it's good for some things, but it will be a bit of a limited field of view. And then you're gonna have to do more flight lines. There's gonna be more overlap. There's gonna be more overlapping areas, and the more overlapping areas you have, the more necessary it is that the lever arms stay the same. The less interpolation happens. You want those things to match up, and so that's why I say this is a great unit if you want to keep it still. But if you're thinking that you're going to gimbal it around, super fast while you're flying along, and thinking that you're going to model something very accurately, prepare to be surprised.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to kind of piggyback off of that is that, through our journey, like when you and I were both at Geodetics, that, at least early on when we were putting, their MMS on a Velodyne system, we learned really quickly that IMUs do not like rapid acceleration, and they don't like non-standard acceleration. And to translate that into layman's terms, we want nice smooth turns. We don't want to be jerking left and right. We want to be doing our motions in predictive manners, so that that companion computer can predict where our next location is going to be. And every time we introduce a turn, or every time we introduce a gimbal movement, we actually introduce positional error. That at least I don't have the math to figure that out.
And heading has always been the hardest thing to solve for. We've fought with heading all of our lives. So like heading is the hardest thing to solve for. You're already solving for something that is extremely difficult. Why add something else to this? So that's why I say, again, like it has its place. You can do surveying with it. If you are looking at 1 foot contour lines, you don't gimbal pitch it, things like that. You can do a lot with the unit. It's still very useful. It's just, it can be oversold, I believe.
Well, and I think that's the piece of the market that scares me, right? While I'm excited about the M1 coming out, I think the bigger piece that the folks that are entering in, and we've seen survey teams go out and do full-on survey studies with LiveVox sensors across different integration platforms. So, and seen some pretty interesting results with the same sensor, but different integration software packages. But I think what scares me is we're seeing other surveyors tout how excellent it is, but they're not citing a standard, right? Are they citing ARSPS standards? Are they citing USGS standards, FEMA standards, USDA standards, or their local DOTs? So I don't see them tying this into what you said, like a 1 foot contour. What does that mean to a surveyor? And so for our audience here today, is like when you go out and get ready to do this, you really need to understand what 1 foot survey means, which means we're at a 6 foot or 6 inch, absolute accuracy. What's absolute accuracy? And you can see where this would actually, I don't want to fully go into it, man, but there's some education that I think that these guys that are going to adopt need to have on this. But hey, I'd like to shift really quickly because we've talked a little bit about gimbal systems and a little bit about hardware. What I'd like to more talk about is the trade-off. So like we're in this flux of going from where you and I have been doing traditional drone survey, fixed systems, Regals, Optex, Velodynes, and even LiveVoxes, on a fixed system. And now we have the L1, and you've had a lot of folks come to you to process their L1 data for them, which is already assigned. Let's talk a little bit about the trade-off or of like, of a more expensive system, let's say a Regal Minivux, and that Regal Minivux could be a Lidar USA, it could be a Phoenix, it could be Yellow Skin, it could be Green Valley. We don't care at this point, just that there is a workflow at a certain price point, right? And then we can compare it to a lower end, not lower end, but let's say the L1, we'll use the L1, but
portable.
What's the cost of processing? What's that trade-off look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, that's something that nobody's really considering right now. They just assume that, hey, this is another DJI product. I've had a Mavic for 3 years, and we're going to be off to the races. Look, I got a LiDAR now. And get the data back, and then they're just like, well, I don't understand the manual. I don't understand how to run through these things. I don't understand how to post-process it. And then when they do get a point cloud, they're all excited, submit it to their client. The client calls us and goes, we're upset again. Like, people are misrepresenting these products. Just because you have a point cloud doesn't mean you're done. Like, you're just beginning at that point. You've just geo-referenced your points, and hopefully you've geo-referenced them properly. And there's so much that goes into it. Me coming from a surveying background, me coming from a military background, targeting, we're trying to put a missile in a window. We're looking for that window. And it's not, there's not room for error. We don't want to hit the wrong window. I mean, not that it's really going to matter, but so this is it comes from a place of, I care very much about the correct representation of these products. I know that I have one. I know they work. I've used the stuff. So the problem is, like you're saying, the cost of actual processing. Once you get the data off the bird and you're looking to align it to the real world and build something that you can maybe use for a survey of some type, like, that is something that I've gotten maybe 5 or 6 calls for in the last few months, and people are very frustrated. They're afraid that they start to realize it. Luckily, before they start sending the data off, they start to realize, checkpoints aren't matching up, curbs aren't matching up, just the simple stuff. And so then that's when they call us, and it's not cheap. We try to make it as affordable as possible, but it's time consuming. And it's not that we're charging you because you sent us an L1 data and it's hard to work with. We're charging you because it takes so much time.
Right.
A 1 day of collection might take 2 days of processing in order to get it completely ready for delivery to the client, deliverables built, everything like that. Whereas with other units that have, more established workflows that are more survey, I would call them more survey ready. They take significantly less time. 1 day in the field and usually 1 day in the office, and it's ready to deliver.
Well, and let me just kind of jump in and see if I can kind of help for the audience to kind of illustrate what you're talking about. And without picking on IMUs, and let's not even talk about DJI. Okay, we'll kind of keep this in germane. But let's say, and I'm not even going to talk about the LiDAR head in general. Let's talk about the inertial measurement unit in the backside of it. I can take a high-end Honeywell tactical IMU, and because of, as long as that software compiling is perfectly linked and we're bore sighted, which that is a significant cost to make that right. But if that's all right, then when I fly my system, that system can respond to all the little changes. And when I land, I don't have very much strip match error that I have to correct for.
Right.
Okay. And then I don't have to worry as much about any kind of orientation issue. Because for our audience, I think the big thing people don't realize is photogrammetry is kind of a mesh, and you need those ground control points to flatten it to the surface. LiDAR is a homogeneous error that we can make a few element changes and flatten it out. But the nice thing is when you're using a higher end IMU, it rides closer to true. There's always going to be error that you have to correct, but it rides closer to true. So in my process, I'm not having to do a calibration, potentially. I'm not having to do a full bore sight. And then if I do strip match, I'm only picking a few key elements in my data set, and I'm doing, a fraction of a degree in any which plane. and then I said I wasn't going to talk about the LiDAR sensor, but I will just for a second. Depending on if I'm using, let's say, an automotive multipath sensor, or if I'm using something that's actually delivered for survey, the amount of noise and overlap curvature may be different as well, of which sadly a live box does on the outskirts, depending on which setting they put that sensor on, will have thicker fuzz on the outskirts of that field of view.
Yeah.
So, I don't have as much, just to get to the LAS point cloud, I don't have as much data conditioning, and I think people don't understand all those little wickets that are in that piece. And we're not even talking about quality control.
Yeah. These are the beginning of quality control. These are the early stages of ensuring the data comes out right.
Mm-hmm.
Clipping where you need to clip. And, with a 360-degree scanner, like along the outer portions, you start to seeing that fuzz rise up between the two, and a separation there. And so what I've actually found to be quite helpful is just clipping by distance.
Yep.
It's to be a distance thing. It doesn't really seem to be an angular thing, because it is a 360-degree scanner. So it can help if you want to clip it by angle and stuff like that. But that's what these L1 scanners, how they scan in this flower pattern. I find it to be quite amazing. What you get out of that when you're doing like a forestry application, you start to see that you're getting a little bit of forward, side, rear field of view out of every scan, out of every time that thing rotates, and it's like a little figure 8 kind of flower pattern looking thing.
Yeah, the Rosetta. Yeah.
And that basically allows you to we call it painting a surface. So basically it paints the tree trunk. And so then when you want to run it through a forestry application, I won't drop any names, but you want to run it through a forestry application, you can start doing your tree inventories. You don't need the most accurate data in order to do that. You just need to develop a trunk, and really, basically you just need to be able to find a trunk, and you're not the one doing it. It just needs to be defined enough. So, 10 inches of fuzz on a tree trunk, you're going to do just fine doing forestry. And the only problem with that is maybe close flight lines because of the limited field of view. But that gives you a little bit of a benefit too, because then you're able to get more nadir on these things. The more nadir you get things, the more you're going to pick them up, the better you're going to be on the back end. So, for tree inventory, as a surveyor, I hated it. I think every surveyor will tell you that tree inventory is a dirty word, and nobody likes to do it. But these surveyors that we've been able to sell these units to and work with them on, they are understanding now that this is a new technology that's able to actually do this stuff at maybe a more accurate rate than the guys in the field.
Well, we've sold actually half a dozen sensors just in, the forestry and tree inventory realm, because of it's so transformational.
Yeah.
But I think you just hit on that last little piece here of you really have to know, and this is something we do in our regular trainings, you really have to know your use cases. Like we talked about standards, but part of that use case, standards is one, but what is it at the end of the day that you're going to deliver?
Yeah. And I think something else that's really important that Modus brings to the table is that these other companies, you buy a unit, and I've bought enough units in my days to know how this works. You get the generic solution. If you're flying a flat field in Florida, that's 2 acres. 2 acres. A generic solution of this is how you fly. This is how you do your planning. This is how you do, basically your post processing, and you're almost never going to see a flat field in Florida. You're almost always somewhere else in the world traveling around. We just got done doing a big dam job, like a really large dam, and it's like if I were to have had no experience and just ran off the parameters that were given to me when we bought the unit, then I would be in so much trouble. That thing would be buried into the side of the dam right now.
That thing, when you told me about that excited the hell out of me.
Data looks great, and it's all because of being able to adjust to what you're seeing. It's not a generic solution, and that's what Modus kind of brings, is the fact that, like, if you come to Dan with, I want to do mining, you're going to get more mining solutions, but you'll also have a reach back to always change over. You want to do something different? Let's help you. So that's one of those things that the other companies, anytime I try to reach back, they're like, well, we showed you here, we'll send it back to you again. We'll send you your training again. It's like, it's the same thing. It's just a generic solution, but this LiDAR game, things are different. No matter everything that you want to do with it, it's different.
Well, I think, and I think what people, the like Modus in general is LiDAR agnostic, right? We work with pretty much everyone until they get upset that we didn't sell their system because there was something that the customer actually needed that was better. I mean, we don't care. I mean, we want the best technology in the customer's hands that match what they want. And sometimes it's one person and sometimes it's another. And it's not personal. But I think the bigger piece of that is like there's other guys selling LiDAR systems on the market, and they don't take the time to fully understand how to make a product. Like I've come in behind other people with the same product and actually make it work and sold them the product after it hadn't worked. And so, whether it's the L1 or, you're doing, some of the other integrators, I think the important thing, and this is what you do as well, is to have that geospatial business consultant and that support network behind, because the stuff works until it doesn't work. And then when it doesn't work, you're like, what do I do? And it's not that the technology is bad. It's that you need to have your coach there to go, let me fix this.
Yeah, that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And with a lot of the companies that I've consulted with in the past, I don't really hear from them other than, hey, how's it going? Do you have any kind of new information, new software, or anything like that? They just kind of reach out for that stuff. But the solutions that I've been delivering aren't nearly as difficult as an L1 solution. So like, I imagine that if I were to be selling L1 solutions, which I'm open to it, that I would be having to be available to the person, maybe next week, the week after, even though the job is technically done, it's never really technically, and I always tell my clients that, it's never really done. Like once we part ways, there's still more to do, share with each other, because this community is so small. And I know you're the same as me. We learn from each other. Everybody learns from one another. And, if building these relationships, and it actually kind of a funny story. One of the relationships I built recently through this, we had to reach out and get LiDAR data, get base station data from their headquarters that was just like about 10 miles from, or 10 kilometers from our site, because our base station died. And it's like, if I hadn't built that relationship, had the ability to reach out to the surveyor and be like, I know you have a constant station running at your office. Can I use the data? And that's one of those things where, it's not just because you want something in return, but we're going to be there for each other. So
yeah.
So we just,
well, heck, I went to a competitor's place the other day when I was in Denver. I had done the worst thing you could think of. I had the LiDAR, I had the drone, I had the batteries, everything was checked. But I had pulled off my LiDAR mount from one system, and I didn't put the rods back in. And so, right? And it's like 11 o'clock at night. And so I actually called my competitor and he hooked me up.
really?
That's how tight, things are. Is like, even though I probably took business from him that day, will I hook him up? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a good community to be in, and we just all kind of have to keep it this way. We have to keep it this way.
Well, hey, first off, thank you for jumping in here, because I don't think a lot of people get to see this level of conversation, and when we sat down the other day and went, we really need to share this. So thank you for being able to jump on here so that people can kind of get a little bit of a more insight behind the veil of LiDAR, because I think most people don't fully understand everything that's in that, beyond the shiny box. So thank you for that. And I think for the group here today, one thing that I would like to do, I'm going to pop this up here, is first, if you want to know more about the L1 and processing, and you had questions beyond this, you can see down below, this is Chris's personal email that can field questions for you or answer some of your questions on the viability of an L1, of the Terra system, and all the little facets. And then for the guys that are kind of edging and looking for this, if you want some like online LiDAR drone training, and you want to try it with real software, you know, you want to actually process data, see what that actually looks like, or you want to actually do flight planning and do the and use flight automation software and see what that looks like. We have a series of LiDAR courses that are rolling out at learn@modusai.com, and that you can kind of pick and choose those things as you want to develop your path in integrating LiDAR into your mapping practices. So so again, you know, reach out to Chris if you have questions on this, because he's been putting some good time into this and has some really good insights. Yeah, I hope to see you guys here on the next round.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
No, thanks everybody for coming. Hey, if you like this, share it and go ahead and hit the notifications, because I'm going to do a lot more of these. We've got phase 1 coming up next week, so can't wait to bring in that. So thank everybody. I will see you guys in the next video. Take care all.